The United States and Iran may have stepped back from the brink of another major military confrontation. US President Donald Trump has announced that Washington has decided to hold off a planned military strike on Iran, saying a possible diplomatic breakthrough is now taking shape. But while Trump is talking about an imminent deal, Tehran is sending a far more cautious message, raising fresh questions about whether the deal exists outside Trump's Truth Social account. Here's what we know. In a post on Truth Social, President Trump claimed that the United States was fully prepared to launch military action against Iran. In his words, the US was locked and loaded with military power not seen since World War II. He then said Iran and several Middle Eastern countries requested Washington to pause the attack because the framework of a deal had been agreed upon.
So we had an attack that would be the biggest attack since World War II, and it would have been disastrous for them, and they didn't want us to do it. And frankly, Saudi Arabia didn't want it either. They thought that a deal is imminent.
According to Trump, that proposed deal would include two major commitments: the immediate reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most critical oil shipping routes, and an end to Iran's nuclear threat. That's a remarkably ambitious announcement. The only problem? The other side doesn't seem to have read the same script as President Trump. Trump also claimed that Israel supports the diplomatic approach and said the attack had been cancelled for now, provided negotiations continue to make progress. The announcement comes after weeks of heightened tensions following US and Israeli military action against Iranian targets and Iran's retaliatory missile and drone strikes.
What prompted you to call off the strikes last night?
I was asked to by Saudi Arabia, by UAE, and by Qatar, and by Iran. We were all set to go. It's about at this time right now, and it would have been a massive attack. We were all set to go, but when the allies asked to call it off, you got to sort of say, well, let's see. And the reason they asked is they think there's a deal. There's a deal on Hormuz, and then there will be a deal on the nuclear, or you might call it the denuclearization of Iran.
But Iran's response tells a very different story. Iran's acting defense minister, Saeed Majid Ibn al-Reza, said Tehran continues to treat every American threat as serious and is strengthening its military preparedness rather than lowering its guard. More importantly, Iranian officials have denied reports that a deal has already been reached on reopening the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's semi-official Fars news agency, quoting sources close to the negotiations, rejected media reports of an agreement. Military sources also insisted that restrictions on shipping remain in place and that vessels must continue following routes designated by Iran's Revolutionary Guard.
We were also asked by Iran, very strongly actually. They said, we'd like to make a deal now.
So while Washington is speaking of a breakthrough, Tehran is effectively saying, what breakthrough? Despite these differences, diplomacy does appear to be moving forward, at least on paper. President Trump has confirmed that fresh negotiations with Iran are scheduled to begin on Monday. He said Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar all urge the United States to avoid military action because they believe a deal remains possible.
So they asked us, Iran specifically, but the other three said I asked Saudi Arabia, the king. I said, the crown prince, I said, what would you rather do? Would you rather have us do this or not? They said, we would much prefer a deal as opposed to an attack because you don't know where these attacks lead.
Which is perhaps the most interesting part. If negotiations are only beginning, calling the deal done might be a tad bit optimistic. But President Trump doesn't shy away from it. Meanwhile, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has called on Tehran to ensure that the United States honors the Peace of Memorandum of Understanding signed between the two countries in June. He described the agreement as an important foundation for Iran's future foreign policy, while acknowledging that recent military escalation has placed its future in doubt. For now, the immediate threat of another round of US strikes appears to have eased. But the biggest question remains unanswered. Has a breakthrough actually happened, or is it simply another case of President Trump announcing the final score before the match has even kicked off? Will the Strait of Hormuz fully open? Can Iran and the United States reach a lasting nuclear agreement? And most importantly, will diplomacy succeed where months of military escalation has failed? The coming round of negotiations will provide the answers. Until then, the facts remain simple. Trump says there's a deal, Iran says there isn't. And the rest of the world is waiting to find out which version of reality wins. This is Shivangi Mukherjee for India Abroad.